Thank you for listening to Return to Roots Mil2Vet Resource Podcast, where we document our shared experiences, stories, and transitioning and reintegrating from the military to the community. For more information, go to mil2vet.com. If you have little ears, ensure you listen to the content before you allow them to listen. And if you are in crisis and homelessness, suicide ideations, or incarceration, dial 211 Courage to call for assistance. Now, stand by for the sound of freedom.
Return to Roots. Today we're speaking with Scott Medlin. He's a transitioned Marine from back in 2007. Followed that up with 15 years of law enforcement. He's a speaker. He authors, creates content. He just stays presenting at first responder conferences and police academies. Real good, strong presence on Police One and Law Enforcement Today, which are very, very followed police podcasts. He's got his channel called The 10 Code Mindset. Look him up on YouTube. Good stuff. Currently serving as a law enforcement coach with Performance Protocol and making differences out there on the line for our men and women in blue. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Scott Medlin.
Well, thank you, Nooch. No pressure on me now.
Oh, none at all, man. You got this, man. Hey, you're seasoned, man. Marine, man. You got that on the law. You cool as a cucumber. You got this.
Yeah, cool as a cucumber. My wife says that a lot.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, man. So after 15 years in law enforcement, man, what took you off the line and into your current coaching and mentorship role, and especially with down there at the conferences and the academies?
Yeah, I got out completely in 2022 from law enforcement. It just wasn't working out with my family anymore, bottom line. And I left active law enforcement. I went my last 2 years on it for the most part were part-time, working as a part-time police officer at a university. But for 12, 13 years, I was at a city of about 90,000 population, 170 plus officers. And like I said, it wasn't working out with the family. We can go into that later if you want, but I realized I'm not going to be able to advance anymore in the career here, but I wasn't ready to leave law enforcement entirely. So I said, you know what, if I can't work in it, I'm going to work with it. And that's what led to me writing books and teaching and speaking literally coast to coast now. And it's been a blessing, and I've had a great time sharing the mistakes I made, the lessons I learned, but also what I've found out through research and life experiences about how we can really a lot of times combat the morale issues we face, but also the alarming and dangerous statistics regarding mental health, which goes for veterans as well. So it's all kind of in sync with each other.
How much similarity do you see between like because of course, police and law enforcement, sheriffs, the chippies, man, the whole thing, it's all very paramilitary. Just like that, how much similarities? I mean, is it like damn near exactly the same minus, it's all rank and file? What's the similarities? What's the differences?
Well, what I noticed throughout the years was, you have the rank and file, but then you have that camaraderie because you go through things that the most people will never experience. You have just like the camaraderie, and then you have like that calling, that passion, and some people just sign up for a job because they have to pay the bills. A lot of people get into the military because they feel a calling towards it, or a lot of people get into law enforcement because they feel a calling towards it. And those were some things that I definitely realized for both military and police, just off the top of my head. And that's what really struck me as the most dynamic and obvious. But that also, with those aspects to it, it does make it harder to transition out of it. You just can't walk away from it. Now, some do, I'm sure, but for the most part, it's really a challenge to walk away and just be like, hey, this is something new I'm going to get into. It's a lot. It really is.
With everything going on in society right now, a lot of stuff. I used to get a kick out of, oh man, we got this many promoted, and this, that, and the other. It's like, bro, dude, there's this thing called attrition, dude. It's a thing. That's one of the things that's directly proportional to the amount of promotions. And I got a feeling it's probably exactly the same on the first line with y'all. But in the last, I don't know, 5, 7, plus years with the attitude change towards the first line. How's that affected the tenured guys, or people wanting to move up, or the recruitment, trying to bring people in? How's that really impacted the law enforcement?
It's really put a hurting on law enforcement. A lot of people are thinking, why would I ever get into a job where I'm going to be subject to stuff like this, even if I'm in the right in some points, still get criticized before all the facts come out? Why would I even get into a career like that? So it's definitely hurting recruiting, but also it is what it is. We need leaders. Military is no different. Leadership, people don't quit jobs, they quit people. Now, I know if you're under contract in the military, you can't exactly quit, but leadership is important. Where are the best units? Well, wherever the leaders are. So we really need some leadership. And then so far as those that are still in, like I was still working in 2020 when the pandemic happened, and then the very unfortunate incident where that ex-officer killed George Floyd. I mean, I had never felt such weight putting on a police uniform like the day after that incident happened. I mean, just like, even though it was several states away from where I was, it was just, there was so much weight to it. And of course,
but social media is in our hands, in our face.
Yeah.
All that. It doesn't matter what happens or where. That magnitude come down hard on the cops, I'd imagine.
It's crazy how something like from a micro fraction of a percentage of a group of police officers, right, did something wrong, and then it just kind of blasted out and made it look like everybody else is doing wrong, when you got all these excellent people out there serving, like actually serving and protecting the community. So man, that sucks. And we also have seen that, at least in my military career. I was a Guantanamo detainee guard.
Okay, gotcha. My youngest brother worked in Guantanamo, and I heard all about that stress.
And like, one bad thing happened out of all these people, and you can't really imagine having to guard somebody that possibly was trying to take your actual life later on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I'm not trying to I can't really divulge like too much information on that, but
right,
like, that happened. That literally happened. And you got to guard these people. And then, one person does, one group of people that follows bad leadership. And just, oh man, it gave us such a bad rap, but we did our best to hold that professionalism, even facing, what you experience all the time as a police officer. So man, that sucks.
Well, Chris, you brought up a good point, how you did your best and the other ones did their best to be professional in light, and despite the bad that happened. Whenever the George Floyd incident happened in 2020, I just looked at myself in the mirror and I was just like, okay, I have that much more I have to do to make people know that not all cops are like the one up in Minnesota, that ex-cop. And I did that. I mean, I had already had a pretty successful career, no formal complaints. No, I mean, it was just one of those where I was like, okay, I got to do this much more to shed light on who I am and what many other police officers represent, where we just want to be the right people to show up and bring the right solution when 911 is called. And I took that responsibility seriously, especially after that incident in 2020.
How much, obviously you deal with, what percentage would you give you're responding to the bad? 99, maybe more. I mean, that's what you get associated with. So when you're going out, about what value, like a minute ago I was saying, how much changed in the last 5-7 years? Has there been a big shift in, say, community relations on trying to improve the image of, or what are there moves being made with different law enforcement agencies, or the right people saying like, hey, this is necessary? And I'm struggling to formulate this question here. Sorry, bro. More of a, do you have the right people who aren't cops, and are there good relations with the ones that are cops? Like the movie Colors comes to mind, Robert Duvall's character, and like he was so close with so many of the guys that were doing what they did. He knew it was there, but that street cred, if you will, that hey, this cop's a real thing here, man, don't be an idiot, kind of thing. How much of that's involved, or how much of that has changed with the big social media shift on the target on cops?
It's been one of those where, unfortunately, some high ranks in policing have realized that certain things needed to change, but it's like they just are so cemented in the way things were. However, a lot of agencies have done very good with adapting to the times in regards to social media, where if something happens, they don't have to wait for the local news to come on at 5 o'clock to give an update. They'll put it on their Twitter feed, or they'll put it on their Facebook page and say, hey, this is going on. We're aware of the situation, and really avoid the phrase, no comment at this time, or it's under investigation. Like, let the public know as much as you can legally. And a lot of times they do. So like that, I've been impressed with some that needed the social media presence, and they've gotten it. So they've gotten with the times, because how many people are checking the local news now? No, people get their news on social media. So that was really important. I think before 2020, we were still, at least the department where I worked, we were pretty good about going to community events. The only thing I disagreed with, and this is me personally, they would push it so hard for officers to go to community events that there'd be more officers than people at some of the events. And I thought that was overkill, like big time, because the officers would end up just talking to each other and not the people. And I'm thinking to myself, well, we could have had 3 go and interact with people, and the others could have been out there doing police work rather than stuck at the community meeting. That's just my personal opinion. But any agency that's serious about mending relationships or building relationships just has to stick with the times of how people communicate without jeopardizing any kind of professionalism and stuff like that.
Do you think that, like, the population of a city, let's just call it cities versus rural, now, like where Chris lives, I used to live in that town. Actually, I think there's probably like 15 or 20 cops in the whole place. Right. It's just not real big. It's like, well, how big is the town up to? But it was 15,000 when I left. What's it up to now? About 20 something?
I would say 20. It is. It's actually growing. It feels. Anyways, that's totally different. But yeah, it's growing. I think it's like 25 actually. I don't want to state where I live exactly, but if you can Google image stuff, you'd probably figure it out. So.
Well, so but in every little town, like the one where I'm currently staying, actually, there's only like 5 cops, and that includes the chief. It's just so small. But everybody knows all the cops. Everybody knows the chief. They show up to stuff. So it's like this is like the relations in the small towns. Is that just the nature of the business, where the relations are better in the small towns than they are in the biggest or in the big ones, or is there something that could change? Is there something that could change that?
So far as the bigger cities, it's which cops are out there the most in certain areas, particularly high crime areas, and they will be more well known to the people in those areas than, say, an officer who just got assigned to that patrol district. Now he or she has to work their way into getting to know people, and there's nothing wrong with me saying this, that they have to earn their respect. Like, no, I understand that we should, when a police officer shows up on a call, you should respect them. And if it's a dangerous situation and they're yelling, everyone, stay back or get your hands up. Yeah, you should comply with them if it's legal, moral, all that. I'm just saying, like, but at the same time, the officers have to be, they're people as well. So they have to earn the respect. There's nothing wrong with that. But it does take time, particularly in a bigger city, just because there's just so many more people. But that's when not centralized, but more area-focused patrols happen, and it's typically the same officers in a neighborhood or a certain area where there's commercial businesses, but it's up to the officers to actually get out and meet people and talk to people and then become known and earn the respect of the people they encounter. Even even the people that they have to fight, like literally. I mean, I've been in fights with people and we started off on the wrong foot, but by the end of the arresting process, I was asking them how their kids were doing and we were having a conversation. I mean, stuff like that. It's all about respect, empathy, but yeah, don't get me wrong. In a smaller town, way easier to get to know a lot of the people, obviously.
That's one thing that us leaders, we learn sometimes by trial and error, but you have to earn the respect.
Yeah.
That you should already have. Like you mentioned it, hey, you should respect those in positions of authority because they should have the respect that they deserve, right? But we should respect people in general, and that's what's lacking.
Mm-hmm.
People don't respect each other, and you know what the root cause, in my personal opinion, is? People don't respect themselves, and typically when they don't respect themselves, how can they respect anything else?
You bring up a good point. When I heard that phrase, when someone points a finger at you, there's four fingers, but there's three fingers pointing out, there's four, whatever, pointing back at themselves. But also it's like, when I had people rage out on me, I always had to say to myself, it's the uniform they're raging out on. It's not me. They don't know me. And if they did know me from other previous interactions, well, then guess what?
Yeah. They wouldn't have done that.
They wouldn't have done it, but at the same time, they're raging out at me because they're unhappy with something, whether themselves or they're just taking out their frustrations with whoever else on me. And that's where it's up to the officer to have that empathy and say, no, something else is going on. Why are they acting this? I'm not excusing it by any means, but to be able to see it, it's very hard for someone to be respectful to others when they're absolutely angry with their life or don't respect themselves, stuff like that.
God, what's crazy about that? I was an ROTC teacher for a little bit, and it's just ironic that Chris mentioned that. Is, I tell the kids, your first and most important fundamental respect is to oneself, because if you don't have that, you don't know how you're going to set the boundaries for what you're going to allow people to treat you like, and how you're going to treat your mom, especially teachers,
that's why I really hammer home mindset to law enforcement, because one, the job's stressful enough, but if you get to a point where you're going down a road, this is true for the military as well. If say you're on deployment and you're an NCO and you have people you have to lead, or you're a higher rank, if you don't take care of what's between the ears and you start to lose respect for yourself, or you start to get so disgruntled, that all comes out. And they say, crap rolls downhill. I'm putting it lightly, right? The rated G version. Your personal negative feelings and negative emotions and negative thought patterns all of a sudden is rolling downhill to the other people. And that's not good. Military and law enforcement.
Yeah. One thing I also want to point out, man, the earning it, we have a saying whenever we promote our new NCOs and stuff like that. And we tell them, earn it every single day. And it's not earning that rank, it's earning the respect that is afforded to that rank. Like, it's just a position. It's not your position to hold. You just have that one little tiny speck of time that you hold that title. So you better earn it while you have it. Because
amen.
You know what I mean? So like you gotta earn it every single day. And it's like you said, man, respect should be given. Yeah, people should respect themselves. Yes. But when you're in those positions, don't go in there thinking your shit don't stink.
Right.
Because it does. That's what they do.
Man. Yeah. I had one. There was a company grade officer on my first deployment. I will not even get too specific, even though it was 20 years ago. The fact he held the rank, he was cussing out E8s and above. I was like, are you kidding me? It was amazing. And not a leader by any means. Just, by gosh, I'm this rank. You'll do what I say and no questions asked. I'm like, I mean, I think one of the best definitions of a leader is someone who can get others to follow them out of curiosity. He was far from that. So anyway, yeah, the whole respect thing, he just didn't have it.
Yeah, the whole leading out of fear bit, I mean, that's going to motivate
Right.
people to do just the absolute bare minimum, just enough to,
Yep.
who was it? My Hollywood hero, Peter Gibbons from Office Space, actually is just like, what's that do? It motivates people just enough to do the minimum standard. I'll come in. Carlin talks about that in stand up, it's like, it just gets these guys to whatever do and just barely. Oh, man. You were dabbling, man. You kind of hinted to it in just a couple of your discussions, man. You kind of hinting towards mental health, and man, it's a pretty serious thing. And I was wondering, man, if you would talk a little bit about your book, Mental Health and the Fight That the Heroes in Blue, and how is it these men and women are just coping with being a cop today? Because I ain't worried about 8 years ago. I ain't worried about 10. You can't reflect on that. You can't get mad at that picture. You can reflect on it. You can learn from it. But talk about it today.
Yeah, I wrote that book in 2020. Actually released it April of 2020, right before everything fell out from May of 2020 till today. However, I wrote it because I didn't know until I was 12, 13 years into the job that more police were dying by suicide than in the line of duty. And I thought to myself, you mean to tell me I'm just now finding out about this? Like, they're all about training us. Yeah, they're all about training us to address a risk or a threat that presents itself. And I was more of a threat to myself, and I never knew about that statistically. And then needless to say, when I was in the Marines, I mean, there was nothing about mental health, nothing. I got back from Iraq, and what they did was I told them I had been part of a close mortar fire incident that almost killed me. And the doc was like, okay, well, here's a sticky note. I'm going to put it on the floor. You need to pick it up. I'm like, what? All he was doing was making sure I didn't have some major TBI and I could understand basic commands. After that, and after the law enforcement thing, I was like, you know what? There needs to be more done, because I know that military, law enforcement, I myself during that time thought myself to be this invincible warrior who just really felt no pain. And I believed 3 damaging words: I am fine. And I wasn't fine looking back on it. I know many others that are like that, military or law enforcement. I said, we got to get to the bottom of how our brains work at a basic level. And even though you feel called to be in the military, you feel called to be in law enforcement, you thrive in high stress situations at time, and you really answer the call and whatever you need to do. You're a good team player. Your brain is still locked in survival mode at a basic wiring level. So I really dove into that. But then I said, you don't have to stay there. And then I also talked about how we can't stay in a fight, flight, or freeze state for the rest of our lives. We just can't. And the thing is, if you're thinking about a critical incident you are a part of, then you're essentially reliving it, particularly if you think about it first person, and thus there's an emotion attached to it. And your mind can run the risk of not knowing the difference between a thought and the actual events if it were occurring. And therefore, you still have stress chemicals firing off. They're not meant to fire off repeatedly. Your body cannot sustain that. And I'm not immune to this. I have health effects because of this state of hypervigilance. I wrote all about that, as well as solutions as to how we can maximize our mind strength. And I think that's very important, because nobody bats an eye when people go to the gym, but you all of a sudden say you're working on your mind and people are like, what, something wrong with you? No, nothing's wrong. Just something's bothering me. Can't let it stay there.
You're muted, Chris.
Yeah, man, you're absolutely right about the whole entire, oh, what's wrong with you, man? You can't handle your stuff. You got to go talk to the shrink. And then like you hear all that shit talk that would happen in the barracks, or just, talking to crap in the smoke pit, or
right.
all these people are like, oh, well, if you go see psych, then you could get kicked out, and that whole entire over and over again. So people would not take care of their mental health, like at all. And so we're all just a bunch of delusional people because we never took care of our stuff.
Yeah,
So
like,
we're just perpetuating it over and just making it
yeah,
worse.
it's like stop being in denial. You are a human. There's no way around it. But also, it's like if you don't go see somebody, of eventually you'll get to a point where you either have to go see someone, or there's some kind of illness that pops up, or like in law enforcement in particular, it was, I guess in the military as well. If you don't take care of yourself and you start reacting through adverse behavior or negligent behavior, all of a sudden you're in trouble and you're kicked out regardless whether you want to be or not, all because you didn't take the time to take care of yourself mentally.
It's interesting because you talk about like high performance stuff and like the mental health. What was it like 6 years ago at the Olympics? What was her name? Gabby Douglas, right? Like right in the middle of competition, dude. She's just like, bro, and then like
Right.
that goes to be one of the ignition sources to go on to coach the whole coach with everything and started spilling and stuff like that. But a lot of people's like, oh, quitter, 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 quitter. And it's just like, bro, that was actually a kind of cool power move, actually, because now what is that? I'm talking about 20 next year, I think. Didn't she talk about coming back? Or there was that saw some hints about like just getting back in to compete again. So who knows? Maybe she went and took care of it. And she's been grinding for the last 6 years. Watch her come back as a serious beast now this time.
Oh, I would hope so. I would definitely hope so. But yeah, I mean, you can only take so much. And unfortunately, I feel like when there's that denial piece, when it's like, no, I'm okay. And we start making excuses, or we start living in like this state of cognitive dissonance where we're acting different from our beliefs, and you're like, you're using the easy ways to cope, like drinking, gossiping, impulsive behaviors, whether it be spending or sex and all this kind of stuff. And it's not good but you're just continuously doing it. And that doesn't help the mental health either, all because you just can't say, I'm really hurt by something, or I'm really bothered by something, or I just can't stay going this way. And we just get fixated into the easy ways of coping sometimes, or negative thought patterns. It's really damaging. And it's just unfortunate that military and law enforcement and other first responders in particular, heck, even the people in medical fields, doctors, nurses, they're more at risk for mental health illnesses. And it's just still not, how do I say it, like normalized, or it's just, it's shunned upon. Like, no, this can't happen to us.
It's almost like we're stuck in a big, gigantic ash experiment of conformity, and it's just like, well, I don't want to fess it up, but who knows? You ever wonder why, if exactly for those things, those professions, police, dark humor, firefighters, dark humor, the ER docs, dark humor, the EMS, dark humor. We've got the most darkest humor. It's almost, you wonder like, oh God, I can't believe you guys would ever say, have you no empathy? I can't believe you'd say that. It's just like, well, bro, dude, where's the release at for some of these professions? And I don't know, dark humor is pretty damn funny sometimes.
That's true, but yeah, dark humor is pretty. I mean, there's those things we stay away from, though, like children, and there's certain things you don't joke about, but other things, yeah. I mean, hey, if I said I never use dark humor, I'd be lying.
So when you were doing all that, trying to figure out the why, what is that? What inspired your next book, 101 Health Tips for Cops?
Yeah, I just wanted to present more solutions, because I just thought to myself, wait a minute, it seems like a lot of people look at mental health as this complicated beast. But then I was like, no, there's all these different ways we can take care of ourselves physically, socially, spiritually, and mentally. And I just wrote more about it. And it was really simple, 101 ways. Some of them, some tips as simple as just quotes. That's it. Just to help you think about things a little bit differently.
And while you were writing it, how much more fed your brain? How much more did you learn about all the stuff as you were doing the deep dive into this?
Oh, a ton. I just realized how easy it is to live in a state of survival. Or if you're not careful, you stay in that fight, flight, or freeze, and you're just pretty much always stressed out because you're running on, well, it's that analogy of the speedometer where it can't stay in the red. If you're running your car and then you go into the red area, you can't, your mind and body are no different. And I learned a lot. And that's what led to me pushing past the fear of public speaking, but also pushing into the fear of, I'm probably never going to know it all. But by gosh, I'm going to get out there and tell my story, and I'm going to try to tell it to as many people as possible. And it's that thriving mindset where it's not like instant success. It's just improvement. It's growth. You don't have to settle for the negative. You don't have to just settle for the way things are. If you work on your mindset, a lot of times things on the outside won't change. But the fact you're looking at them differently or put positive meaning to them or strong meaning to them, it's absolutely a thriving mindset, all because of growth. And I think even in the military, what do we do a lot? We either gossip or we just complain. Even in law enforcement, it's just so easy because our brains want to conserve energy and they like what's familiar. And what's familiar and what's easy? Negativity.
Because it's just surrounding all of us. Oh, well, not really.
Yeah, exactly.
Surrounding. It's just, that's that answer in the call. It was kind of like when we were talking about what percentage gets called. It's just like, that's always negative, and so it's almost like, is that just an inherent classification, how to categorize? Well, they're only ever here when it's bad. Well, you called me when it got bad. That's what you call. You call 911. Who are you going to call? Domino's?
Yeah, nobody calls 911 to say, hey, we're having a good day. Right. But no, that I learned a lot when writing those two books. I mean, it was just like, wow, why wasn't I trained on this in the Marines and in law enforcement? And we got to start training this stuff a lot more. And I think we can see a big shift in mentality. I really do.
The when you were creating the content, right? The books that you did, and then eventually the podcast and all that stuff. What kind of like got you to create that? I usually find something happens. Something usually positive happens whenever a negative thing happens. And one thing you kind of alluded to was family. You just realized that you weren't getting that family time. Can you expound a little bit more on that?
Oh yeah. What catapulted it was whenever I did learn just how bad mental health was in law enforcement and the military, with almost at least 22 suicides per day. Absolutely dangerous and sad. The fact that I made mistakes along the way, I was like, you know what? I've got to take what happened to me. I battled an addiction 2 years into my law enforcement career. Let me backtrack a little bit before that. When I got home from Iraq in 2005, for a year, my family relationships were deteriorating. I thought everybody else was the problem because they hadn't seen what I had seen. They couldn't understand. I thought everyone else was the problem. And then a year later, my dad comes up to me and says, I'm losing you, and I'm not going to lose my family. And I had a lot of respect for my dad. So, I mean, that shook me. And he said, now, fortunately, we have someone you can go see. And I got treated for in neurolinguistic programming, but it was post-traumatic stress disorder. So there was that. There was the addiction 2 years into my career. And then fast forward several years from that, I got so wrapped up in the canine job. I was a canine officer. I got so wrapped up in that job that I let it become who I was, or at least I thought it was who I was. And my wife and I started growing apart. And she basically gave me the talk about it's either me or the job. I mean, she said while we're riding down the road, the summer of 2016, we're riding down the road. And she said, with our 1-year-old son at the time in the back seat of the car, she said, I'm thinking of doing this on my own. I'm thinking of doing this on my own. It hit me right then and there. I just become so consumed, and I thought I was okay. I wasn't, and we weren't. I just didn't want people to go through what I did. But at the same time, if anyone finds themselves in that situation, you don't have to stay there. You can work your way out of it just like I did. And that was my why. I was just like, I've got to jump into this fight. It doesn't have to be this way. And if it is that way for you right now, then by gosh, take action. Like that's the only way it's going to help. Taking action. I mean, yes, there's professional help, but even my psychologist had to tell me, Scott, I can only do so much for you. You're the one that has to change your way of thinking. And so I did.
Looking at the that's a rough one. It's almost kind of like you come back at it, and that's where that empathy stuff, like a minute ago when you were talking about, you went to see the doc and you put the sticky on the ground, that doc had no empathy. There was just like, okay, here's the checklist, rolling through the thing, and
yeah,
a little bit of the bedside manner, which is just a lack of empathy. So people thinking like, and you're saying maybe it's everybody else's the problem. Well, they didn't see what you said, so how could they look at they can't look at that world through your lens because only you've done that. So, sometimes our adjustment, I mean, would you agree? Sometimes our adjustment would be that self-reflection. I'm not saying just because everybody else is right means you're wrong, but where does that self-pressure come from? Or I'm sorry, where does that self-pressure, what really takes that? I mean, does it hit the breaking point in your case? Hey, I'm thinking about doing this on my own. Like that was the breaking point.
Yeah. A lot of people don't change until a lot of people don't change till they hit a moment like I did, or there's an illness where your body is so stressed out that literally it manifested itself into an illness. A lot of people don't change until they have to. That's why I also preach self-awareness. Be honest with yourself. How are you really doing? And if there's something that you don't like about what the way a relationship's going, or you don't like the way you feel, you don't like the way you feel overwhelmed, do something about it. Admit it. Be aware about it. Do something about it. But it is amazing how just a lot of times we don't change until we absolutely have no choice but to change. But that's where I believe the military is good insofar as like the self-discipline, like the discipline to show up for yourself and to work out or to put forth a morning routine, to read a certain amount of pages of inspirational material, whatever that may be for you, that kind of thing. And that's what I know, for one, the Marine Corps definitely helped me with the discipline aspect. So whenever I did realize there was a problem, I was like, well, I can instill a certain routine or certain steps and enact the discipline to get it done. But it shouldn't have to be all the time that someone changes only because they have to, because of like a crisis happens.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of speakers and academics. They do lots of teaching. You've got podcasts out there. You got teaching business owners, teaching, and even going to the point of really championing stoicism. Ryan Holiday is a keynote guy. He does a lot of stuff, and he's taught. He like reaches way back to the Romans and brings that into current business. Greg Harden. Mindset of Champions. He worked with, love him or hate him, Tom Brady, and like that stuff. Every time you turn around, you're like, what did Tom do after every take? The defense goes back on it. Where's he? On the right side of that far end of the bench. He's sitting there looking at his little tablet. That dude's discipline was just so, like, it was just not. Dude was a machine. Jordan Peterson, I wouldn't say he so much talks about it a lot, but by God, he's stoic as hell when he's doing all his interviews and stuff like that. Yeah. And with a few exceptions, he has emoted in a couple of cases, like where that humanity in him just really came out. And another dude really popular, he's pretty excited about it. That dude, Andrew Tate, he's talking about like people making money, sitting there doing, and he's got such a following of really young people, mostly men. Same thing with like, Jordan Peterson. He talks about like with men a lot, but he's got almost equal amounts of men and women, So, here you've got, or the martial artists, you got that. Anybody who rolls, anybody who comments, anybody like that, they know that full well, the importance of, focus, so values, focus, drive, motivation. So, service members have that more than most, in my experience. But my question would be, with Stoicism, do you value it? How much? What's its importance in the line of what you do? And why is it so often that Stoicism is often confused with, oh, you don't care?
Right. The main thing regarding Stoicism for me is just tranquility of the mind. That doesn't mean you won't ever feel a negative emotion, because by gosh, if a family member passes away, you should feel very sad. I get that. However, the resiliency, and Stoicism can definitely help with resiliency, being able to bounce back after a hard time, and just really focusing on mind strength. But that's what comes to mind with Stoicism. But the more clear you are in the mind through whatever means you're doing, the more you're able to in my opinion, it goes back to what we were talking about originally with respect, and empathy is no different, where if the more at peace you are with who you are, the more strength you have in between the ears, the more resilient you are, the more empathetic you can be towards other people, because you're not so focused on a negative thought pattern, whether it be a victim mindset or just looking at everything bad, including other people.
Wouldn't you suggest, though, or would you disagree, that like a focus on negative emotion and positive, or negative and the positive, are both almost equally important with Stoicism? I'm not saying get wrapped up in one extra on one and then the other, but
Right.
It's kind of almost like a yin and a yang to just dealing with a lot of that. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say, but at the same time, Stoicism is about virtue, and we know that we can't be so wrapped up in negative that we're going to be virtuous. So I would definitely say we have to not lie to ourselves. Like if something bad happens and we go, oh, I'm not a big fan of affirmations. I mean, if you're not happy in the moment, why would you say I'm happy? Your brain's going to call you out on that. But however, being able to say, how can I become stronger because of this? What can this mean for me? What kind of person am I to get through this? And what can I become on the other side of it? Stuff like that. Looking that as a more poised mindset rather than panic or out of stress because you're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it's yeah. And I think that I was just kind of looking also to get another, I've received a lot of, it's kind of almost made a mock. I've had a couple of friends. I even had a couple of family one time. Oh, we've got a Stow on our hands. Oh, it's just like, bro, man, I can't help it if you can't control your emotions, dude. You're gonna let it go, dude. Just more power to you there, big boy. So it's almost kind of like it gets mixed up, or like discipline. Like somehow, why? Because you want to have the focus. He's over disciplined. What?
What you should? You know what? That brings up a good point in the fact that if you can't be happy for the mental strength or the success of other people, then you're really not happy with yourself, and you'll never get to a point where they are. Like I used to get one of my weaknesses is comparison, and I'll see someone who's I'm a speaker now. And I've seen some people who launch successful speaking businesses in less than 2 years. I'm 3 years into it. It's still a building process. Sometimes I'll find myself comparing myself to these other speakers. I'm like, oh, no, you're doing it. You're doing it. Because it completely robs anyone of joy. But it's like, no, I need to be happy for them. Because if I'm not happy for them, then I'm not ready to have the success that they're having. Nor how is that any virtue in not being happy for someone else? So when you said, Nooch, when you said that story, I'm just like, wow, that brings up the whole comparison thing as well. Yeah, you need to be happy for other people. And dare I say it, I mean, we're not live. Y'all need to take this out, take it out. But I don't like how in America right now, there's a lot of resentment towards the rich. I think there needs to be a mentality of how can we be like the rich? How can we be like the successful? Let's be proud of them and stuff like that.
Well, it was I think it was the first podcast that Chris asked me to jump in for. It was that who's the guy over in England? Chris?
Charles.
Yeah. And well, one of the things that I said is that it's winning or losing, right? So losers hate winners. And losers will talk bad about other losers and tell them what losers they are, because that's what their losing mindset is. They have lost any kind of motivation to go. Now, winners don't hate losers. And this is one of the things, they just too busy freaking winning because they're hanging around with people with a similar mindset. Winners don't hang out with losers. Winners hang out with other winners, and that's why they're winning. So yeah, okay. Say what you want. And like, I think that what that is when we start talking about like when equity, gets misused and it gets confused with equality of outcome, regardless of the effort put into. That's like, is what every baseball team needs to have their turn at winning the World Series. No, I hate that the Yankees got 28% of the attendance. I freaking hate the Yankees. I'm tired of them winning. New England got tired of them winning back in the 90s. Whoever won the San Francisco-Dallas game was going to win this Super Bowl. I got so tired of it. But, like the Michael Braun argument right now, Jordan and LeBron, they're both winners in different eras of what they got. And that's earlier. It's like, stop comparing to then. It was a different time.
Yeah, good point. I like that. I like that you said winners don't hate losers, but losers hate winners, and winners just keep hanging out with winners. Yeah, and losers keep hating on winners. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, very good point.
But they're also hating on other losers. You hear them. It's called that gossip. Sitting there talking to us, it's like, oh, that guy, he ain't nothing. Well, you ain't either. Come on, man. There was one more book. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, if anyone really wants to read more into that kind of mindset, I cannot recommend the book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. I cannot recommend it enough. A very good book, and it also helped me when I was going through a low point right before I got out of law enforcement. Just before I got out of active full-time law enforcement. So anyway, Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. I'll give credit where credit is due for sure.
Oh, absolutely. So
I got a little tidbit, man. And you guys just kind of really made me think about this a little bit more. A lot of people measure wealth, right? What is wealthy? People are like, well, rich, monetary. A lot of people like to measure it by a monetary way. But real wealth, people, is something that you can't even touch.
Right.
Real wealth are those things that matter. You can't trade them. You can't sell them. You can't even benefit from them except for love. Like the rich wish they had it. They can never buy it. They can't buy love. That is something that is a real measurement of wealth. So just because somebody has money doesn't mean that they're doing better. And that's, everybody's like, oh, they're always doing better. They always think the grass is greener on the other side of the lawn, but it may not necessarily be that way. And I really think that people need to look at what they could do just to be happy at where they're at. And once you start doing that, things start happening for you. Bro,
that's called water your own grass, and then your grass is going to be as green as the dude that you're sitting there comparing your grass to.
Exactly. Then you'll be wealthy and rich.
People would just do that, just water your own damn grass, like take measure of where you're at and be grateful for what you have. And once you start doing that, there's ways to I don't want to say necessarily manifest, whether you're praying to God for them or you're drawing them on the vision board and asking the spaghetti meatball monster pastafarians, I just You got to put your time and energy to yourself too. And a lot of people just don't want to do that. They want to press that easy button. Look at the lottery. Look at the lottery. Over $1 billion right now.
And dudes are lining up like they got the new iPhone 19 or whatever. Gotta go get that ticket. Come on, bro.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. But then again, think about how many people win the lottery and then go broke within six years or less than a decade. Because
and that's that freaking thing a minute ago. You got all that money. Now you're just an idiot. Your mindset ain't right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. No, you're right. But then, Chris, you brought up being grateful. That was actually one of the ways I worked my way out of depression at one point in my life. The psychologist told me to write down 3 things that I was grateful for at the end of the day. And he said, you have to write complete sentences. And I thought, this is so stupid. There's no way this is going to change my mindset. 30 days later, all of a sudden, I'm thinking of more things that I'm grateful for rather than always thinking about the negative first thing, like split second. And it really changed my mindset around. And you talk about things that wealth can't touch, like my children. I mean, as much as they drive me up the wall, like today was just not a good day with them a lot of times. But when they smile, I feel like the wealthiest man alive. And I'm in the present when they smile. And I'm very grateful for that. And gratitude actually releases serotonin. And I talk about serotonin in my first book, which helps to stabilize your mood. But then, when that's released, then you can have a better mindset, and then you can start, watering your own grass, and then you can start working your way towards being more wealthy and more successful and more rich. So yeah, I mean, it all works.
I saw this bit not too long ago, and it was talking about the power of a smile. Like it's almost impossible if you are inherently a more positive person. I'm not saying all like, oh, everything is awesome, like that old Lego movie and stuff like that.
Wait, are we doing a musical now? Everything.
Oh, come on now. Dude, you can catch me getting my, but 2 things I thought was really that were really cool about that. One, he was talking about how if you're in the presence of other people or even just one person going in and smiling in a room, things start changing. There was a clip on a bus one time or like a subway or something. It was a total social experiment. The dude's just sitting over there. Like he's just looking at his phone and just laughing hysterically at whatever. And then you got 2 guys on the car and they're sitting there and everybody else it was so infectious. But this is what got me the most. Like the study was at a college and they studied people's yearbook pictures back in high school or whatever, and then in college or whatever else they found, and compared that to their life expectancy. So check this out. People, that are Debbie Downers or whatever, 72 on a good day, maybe 73, but the dude's steady positive, whether or not they were surrounding themselves with that all the time, bumped up average another 7 years, dude, 79 and change. So life expectancy, that's not saying smiling is going to make it all go away. It's just saying mindset, how you started your day. Give me 3 grateful things. Boom. Yes. One more book I wanted to ask you about. It was in your 3rd one, which was like kind of a blend between the first 2, comparing that to one of the things we always say in the Navy, or I'm sure it's the same. I don't know, maybe when you were going through your MOS schools, man, when you get to the fleet, you'll see how it's really done. Or, you'll see, or, this is the theory, practical application is later, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. Whatever it is, like to try to say that like there was no value, but there is, so, Truths Beyond the Academy. When you wrote that book, you weren't saying throw out all the lecture and instruction because that's important. However, I think that schools like those, for instance, or they do their best to try to prep the people for whatever. What is it that the academy does its best to try to prepare the cadets for, but just can't do it until you get out on the street and you're a beat cop when you hit the field?
Well, one of the things that struck me first was the academy cannot prepare you on how to work with officers or like seasoned officers. It just can't. You just have to learn that. That's one of the things I dive into in the book. But that can also apply for anyone getting out of their basic training or Marine Corps boot camp. How do you, obviously, to address your superiors by their rank, or sir or ma'am if they're, officers, but embracing the concepts of teamwork and knowing when to ask questions and admitting mistakes and not butting into conversations with the experienced officers. Instead, listen to them, learn from them, stuff like that. Also, really value the time to, I get very specific in that book. I say, you have no idea how much camaraderie can happen when you just break bread at a table and have a meal together, because it can be so easy to, particularly in policing, it's like this officer has to go do this officer has to go do this officer, and then 12 hours go by, a full shift is done. When did we actually take time for each other, in the sense that if we don't build the team, then when the team is tested, it might not show up as well as it could. So camaraderie is a big one for me. But I dove into kind of echoing what I wrote about in the first book. Like, you're a human. There's no way around it. You're going to be exposed to things, whether it's negativity and toxicity within the four walls of a department or within your unit, if you're in the military, to things you could be exposed to on a deployment or on a 911 call. Military and police, kind of the same thing, same concepts. Your brain can only take so much of it if you do not work on taking care of yourself day in and day out. Like, you have to. There's no choice, or else you'll end up like me and so many others, or heaven forbid, worse, those suicide ideations, and you actually go through with it. It's just like nobody's immune. And I made that point very clear. Take care of yourself, and then hopefully you're part of a good team. And if you're not part of a good team, then be that inspiration to bring that team together. It's possible, because you're there for the same calling, same mission. You can. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth the effort.
In that moment that you find yourself being led by one of those leaders that are a little less desirable, and morale's down, and people find themselves making horrible mistakes, because that's what happens in poor leadership environments. I'm not saying it's all poor leadership, but it's more than likely.
Big contributor. Yeah.
And the thing is poor leadership gives opportunity to good new leaders to let their light shine for others that need it. So that poor leadership moment is a great opportunity for those, in little micro levels, even if it's peer to peer, show good leadership by being the example, by helping others with their stuff, and just, going out of the box, man. Like, that could be so beneficial for your leadership role if you ever find yourself in a situation like that.
100%, man. You hit the nail on the head. And don't get me wrong, I've said it earlier, I'm saying it again, that a lot of what I write about, a lot of what I teach about is based on mistakes that I made, but the lessons I learned. And the thing is, it's like, when I was a sergeant on my second deployment, there were a lot of mistakes I made as a new sergeant, but I took those lessons I learned and then applied them in policing, and just to help. And I never held rank in law enforcement, but there were officers out there who were struggling. I knew they were struggling, but unfortunately their supervisors, they were managers. Their sergeants were managers. They weren't leaders. And I was the one reaching out saying, something's bothering you. What is it? And they would finally open up about it. So it's like, yeah, I mean, what you said is just never underestimate your power to make a good influence, even if there is bad leadership up top or wherever the case. Like, do what you can. Focus on what you can control, yourself, your mind, and take care of yourself so you can be that much better for others, even if it's just one other person.
I think this is a good time to switch over to final rounds, save rounds and alibis. Does anybody else? That was Nuccio. You just got me. You're like the only person who can break through my thing.
Dude, I got skills, man. I can hack that Mac, dude.
So let's move on to the final rounds and save rounds and alibis. So you have
All
anything
right.
else before we go into there?
No, I'm thinking, I'm looking back at our conversation going, what did we not cover?
I know, man. No, that was a good one.
Right.
What content? I know you've written your books, and I'm really glad Nuccio got all those out there because it's really important for us as individuals to improve ourselves. And one way to do that is by digesting content, opening up a book, or putting a book in your ears. You know, for those who don't like to read or are always out on the machine working outside, you know, that's me. Um, what content do you recommend people to digest while they're transitioning?
Well, Return to Roots Mil2Vet, you know, that's a good one. Definitely. I
Yeah,
would
no,
definitely, well, I would definitely also say, listen to inspirational material the first thing in the morning, or maybe not first thing, but like very early in the morning before the hustle and the bustle of the day starts, whether it be the demands of having a family or you go into work and there's gossip, or I mean, heck, even before you check the headlines, just listen to some inspirational stuff. I've got some, I have mindset stuff that I cover on my podcast, on my YouTube channel, the 10 Code Mindset, just something that can feed your brain, because the more you do that, the stronger you will feel. Thus, when the challenge of transitioning from military to civilian life happens, you'll have that much more inspiration. You'll have that much more mindset going into it. It's for many, it's not easy, and it's okay that it's not easy. But are you going to get stuck in not easy, or are you gonna get negative or take the victim mentality? No. If you listen to something constructive each and every day, or read something first thing in the morning, you're that much better to withstand the storm that can happen from transition, because it can be a challenge. So I hope that answered your question.
I love it, man. You reiterated the, yeah, was it? Yes, I can. Yes, I can. You know, the little engine that can.
There you
Little
go.
engine
Yeah.
that
I
can.
think I
Yeah,
can. I think I can.
yeah. I think I can. That's it, man. Hey, don't challenge me to misquote a movie or a show. I'm right there. I got it. I got all the misquotes. I'm that guy.
Oh man. Hey Scott. So what do you tell your 17-year-old Scott Medlin? What do you tell that guy to do to make what choice? What do you tell him to prepare for his transition from when the day comes? It's time to move on. What do you tell that guy?
You did what you did, like you were in the military, you were in law enforcement, because of who you are. You're not who you are because of what you did. What you do, your military time, I mean, heck, for me, 15 years law enforcement, that wasn't who I was. It was a big part. It was a big passion. Learned a lot from it. I get it. But you cannot put your value in what you're doing externally, because if you do, does that mean when you get out of the military or you get out of the law enforcement, wherever you are, that you're less of a person? Oh, heck no. Absolutely not. Remember who you are. It's just like the freaking Lion King. He's talking to Simba, and Mufasa appears from the sky, and he's like, "Remember who you are." As corny as it sounds, it's so true. But seriously, always have a growth mindset to keep growing as a person, because things you do externally are going to eventually stop. And what's amazing about the military and law enforcement, other career fields, they're going to move on without you. And if you put all your weight into who you are based on those things, and they move on and you haven't, it's going to make it that much harder. You're a valuable person. Keep growing as a person, because you can never be perfect. And with a growth mindset, even if you encounter pain, on the other side, you'll find success you never thought possible. And that's what I would tell my 17-year-old self.
Yeah, I could dig it, bro. I could definitely dig that, man. You're definitely
Thank you.
getting some heavy nods on this end because you're just like killing it, bro. And one of the biggest things that we talk about is mindset, man. And you've said it. I lost count. I think I was over here marking a little paper. He said mindset, 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 mindset. It's in that consistency over and over and over. And, neuro, was it linguistic neuro?
Neuro-linguistic programming. But there's actually, there's this big term called, and I hope you don't mind me adding this. I write about my first book, neuroplasticity, where basically it's a big word, but the shortened meaning of it is basically your mind has the ability to rewire itself so you perceive things differently, or you disconnect the negative emotion from a negative event. Instead, you put, well, like Marshall, your previous guest said, you put a positive meaning to a negative event, stuff like that, to help you grow stronger. It is possible through the process of neuroplasticity. But like what I got treatment wise was neuro-linguistic programming to disconnect the kind of first person view of what I encountered on the deployments that were dangerous.
Yeah. And I want to reiterate to our listeners, transitioning, it's not just from the military. We all transition in our own way. So, and that this applies so much. Like you're all about the law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, high school, even school teachers and stuff like that. It's a big there's big transitions out there. We all go through them. So I want to make sure that people understand that, listening to our content, listening to your content can help pretty much anybody. One thing I want to hammer down on is what's the secret sauce in getting into the correct mindset? What got you into that correct mindset?
Oh man, my faith. I've been a believer my whole life, but God's not just gonna do something for me. I've got to show up. So I just have to have faith that what happened, I was not alone when it did happen, and that he won't let me down. However, I still have to take action as an individual. And what I started to do was I had to change. Like when I battled depression, I was always focusing on the negative so much that I couldn't even recognize any blessings in my life. Or when I was going through leaving canine, and I realized, man, I let this job become who I was. And I was like, no, this is not who I was. I have to figure out who I am again and what I can do, because there's something else I can do to make an impact and stuff like that. People are probably going to cut pause, or they're going to press pause, or they're going to go to another podcast episode now when I say this word, meditation. All right, hear me out. Basically, it's not some process you have to dread. I bashed it for the longest time, but then when I started to actually practice it, once I got my ego out of my way, started off 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Now the most I ever do is 15 minutes. But here's the deal. We as people are basically a sum of our stories and emotions, essentially, from the past. What I started to do was I realized that the past was just eating away at me. Like the negative emotions felt in the past, I was projecting them into the future. Like in the Marines, we had a saying, hope for the best, expect the worst. Now that was what got us through deployments and certain operations and stuff like that. But that's not a way to think about life. But I was wrapped up in that. So I started meditating, and I got so present in the moment, or I got so vivid in visions of what I wanted to create for myself in the future, that I actually started feeling emotions towards those future events. They hadn't even happened, but I was feeling like they were. So I started waking up with these visions of the future that I wanted to create. Not saying that there wouldn't be challenges in life, there are, but it was just rewiring my brain. So I recommend to anybody guided meditations, particularly first thing in the morning when your brain is in a very moldable state, and start slow with it, and then work your way up to a point that you can tolerate. Like if I meditate more than 15 minutes, I don't really like it. It's very powerful, and I can't recommend it enough. That, and keep moving your body, stay active. My faith and exercise were really two big things as well. Before I started meditating, exercise really helps your body with your mental health as well. So keep moving. I mean, what do they say in the fight? Keep moving. just don't stop moving, stay active. So those are some big things right there.
What did it take for you to find your purpose?
Unfortunately, it took me going through some challenges I never thought that would ever happen to me. But then when I realized I don't have to keep it secret, I can talk to people. And yeah, there might be people who judge and say, wow, you're really messed up. But no, I'm not. I'm just willing to talk about things that people have gone through, people felt. I'm just willing to talk about it. And then when I heard that the phrase, when you feel helpless, become helpful. When I heard that, I said, you know what? How many times have you helped someone and you felt better because of it? And I like when you help someone, you feel better. But then again, you got to be careful, because if you're helping someone and then posting about it, that's just feeding your ego, not your purpose. So I think that as humans, as we grow and as we help people more and more, the purpose will come in the form of whether it's speaking or writing or I mean, heck, even being an electrician, you're serving others. It's just whatever you can do to serve others, that's your purpose. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's what I'm going with.
No, man, it's relevant content, man. I mean, just like podcasts, your books, it's absolutely all relevant. God, I don't think I would be at all presumptuous to say, Chris, man, this is just absolutely a great talk with Scott here. But
Thank you.
With how can people get hold of you, man? Your sites, your websites, or anything like that? Point them in the right direction. Anybody that wants to come learn some more.
Yeah, absolutely. My website is thescottmedlin.com, but you can follow me at the 10 Code Mindset on YouTube, or I just got on Instagram because someone told me, hey, man, stop. You got to get on Instagram. So I'm on Instagram now at the 10 Code Mindset, and I'm on LinkedIn as well. I really am all over. But if you want to find how to get to those, thescottmedlin.com. And I don't just speak to law enforcement. I've spoken to corporate as well. About crisis communication and de-escalation, and in addition to mental health. And I really enjoy speaking. It has become a huge passion of mine, just because I really like to see when people are inspired and then hear about the action they took because of the inspiration they got. So it's a big team effort for sure.
Absolutely. That's that begetting winning bit right there.
You got to do it.
Well, brother, hey, thanks for coming on, hanging out with Nuccio and I, talking to the Mil2Vet Return to Roots listeners. We really do appreciate you coming on here, man. Like, you first came on here before we were recording, and you're like, man, you've had some like heavy hitters. I'm honored to be on here, but it's such a honor of ours to be able to spend time and just talk about real talk, things that we all should be having these conversations in our little tiny groups and stuff like that, is like reaching out and networking with each other and helping each other out. It's awesome to be able to share this space with you, brother. So thank you for taking your time and coming over here and hanging out with us.
My honor. I'm really, really thrilled. I was able to come on the podcast today and be a guest. I really am honored. So thank you. And yeah, to any listener out there, if you find yourself going through a hard time, keep listening to Chris, Nooch, Yogi, whoever. Just stick with this podcast, but don't give up. Just keep showing up, and we can. You're not alone. That's the main thing. You're not alone. But once again, guys, thank you so much.
Yeah, brothers. Hey, Mil2Vet listeners out there. All right, it's not all rainbows and unicorn. And we heard our man talk about his mindset. Go find his content out there and listen to it. He shares his stories. He shares, now he's on Instagram. He's no longer the old era. He's out there helping people out, right? So go out there, listen to his content. And like I said earlier, it's not all rainbows and unicorn. It is your transition. So take charge of it. Mil2Vet,